Robtel Pailey, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Social Policy and also the co-chair for this year's departmental seminar series. And I am so thrilled and honored and privileged to be able to introduce Dr. Samia Al-Botmeh. And I have to just say, I'm grateful for your ability to fill in at such short notice, because there was a presentation that should have been held today that was canceled by a Cape Verdean scholar who will present subsequently at another time. And I thought, given the timeliness of her presentation today, it just made sense for her to be able to share with us some of her insights about the work that she's been engaged in. So without much ado, I'm going to just do a quick kind of bio read of who she is and what she works on, and then I'm going to turn it over to her for about 40 minutes or so. After Samia presents, we'll open it up for Q&A. So Dr. Samia Al-Botmeh is assistant professor in economics in the Department of Economics, Birzeit University, and was director for the Center for Development Studies until about 2014. She previously worked with the Palestine Economic Policy Research Institute in Ramallah and has engaged in research on alternatives to neoliberal development in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as well as gender differentials in labor market outcomes. Her areas of interest and expertise include gender, labor economics, and the political economy of development. And one of the things we've been doing this particular term is really featuring and showcasing the work of critical scholars of color who are doing cutting edge, important research and scholarship that is timely and important. And with that said, I think, Samia, again, thank you for gracing us with your presence. We look forward to what you have to say about this particular and important topic, and I'm going to hand it over to you now. Let's give her a round of applause. The floor is yours.
Thank
Samia.
you. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me in these departmental seminars. Although these are really difficult times for us in Palestine, we've been teaching now for a month, and not really very much teaching. We probably taught for 1 week now over the past month electronically, since our students actually cannot come on campus. So having to conduct our academic work has been highly disrupted, although we're not in the Gaza Strip. I want to first start actually by, for going into my talk, by recognizing the solidarity that we have been getting from various segments of British society, which stands at odds with the stance of the British government, who has been, in a way, standing with Israel on its genocide of the Gaza Strip. So I'd like to start by recognizing this solidarity, because we do appreciate it, and it makes a difference, a huge difference to our everyday lives, be it in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. Because it has been such short notice, I, in a way, recycled something that I've worked on before, to try and illustrate issues of policy, but also issues of how colonialism works to disrupt political, social, and economic life in a manner which it might not seem very obvious, but actually it has a grave impact on economic structures, on people's lives and livelihoods. So the title of my talk will actually consider the issue of Palestinian women's engagement in the labor market. My focus will be particularly on two issues. The first one has to do with Palestinian women's highly noticeable uninvolvement actually in the labor market. Palestinian women tend to have very low participation rates in the labor market. And this is on the backdrop of them actually having very high educational rates. They tend to be the highest educated in the region, compared to both men and other women in the region. My other question that I will attempt to answer in this presentation has to do with the fact is, why then women acquire education if they don't use it for labor market purposes? If they are not getting jobs, and if they are not going to be in the labor market, why do they continue to seek education and higher education as well? This is just to give you an idea of the situation comparatively. Palestine, meaning the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, the occupied Palestinian territories, women's participation rate stands at 17%. 17% is extremely low. If it's not the lowest in the world, it's very low. In Lebanon, for example, women's participation is also low, but not as bad as the West Bank. Egypt as well, Saudi. The entire region has a particularly low female participation, but the Palestinian rates of engagement in the labor market stand out in comparison to even the rest of the region. If we look at the rest of the world, of course, participation rates are higher. In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, it's 63%. The world's average is nearly 50%. At the same time, men's participation rates are very similar to the rest of the world, actually. This is just a snapshot of women's engagement in higher education, not school education, but higher education in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. This includes both. We have, between the West Bank and Gaza Strip, about 53 higher education institutions. That includes both universities as well as colleges. In these 53 institutions, 62% of the students are women. Now, we know that in the rest of the world, actually, women tend to account for a larger proportion of education, particularly higher education. But again, the numbers are particularly higher within the West Bank. At Birzeit University, for example, we have 65% women compared to male students. So what I'm trying to do is just trying to show you some statistics to illustrate the problem that I will try to explain and analyze later on. These are basically participation rates by educational level for both men and women. And you can see the characteristics actually are totally the opposite, in the sense that if we look at women's participation rates, only women with extremely high educational rates are present in the labor market. The participation rates of all other women are very, very low. For men, the picture is more uniform, is more reasonable, in the sense that men with very low participation rates are basically not taking part in the labor market, while all other groups of education are there in the labor market. They're participating in the labor market. So women are basically in the labor market. The ones who are in the labor market have very high educational rates. This is also to show you the unemployment rates in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. These are for both territories, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And as you can see, unemployment rates for men are relatively low. So we have something like 24%, 23%. It fluctuates under 25%. While for women, it's 50%. 50%, if we look at the Gaza Strip on its own, before the ongoing genocide, the percentage for female unemployment rate stood at 75%. So it's again the highest unemployment rate anywhere in the world, not for men, but for women. So the scene in the labor market in Palestine seems to really have very much extremes: low participation rate, extremely high educational rates, extremely high unemployment rates. It's a very extreme picture. When I started studying this situation and trying to understand and disentangle the factors that might explain these extremities in terms of indicators, of course, I looked, being the economist that I am, I looked at economic theory. So economic theory basically explains the situation through looking at two particular aspects: a person's own characteristics. So what sort of age group are they in? What sort of education they have? Where do they live? All these personal characteristics, their fertility rate, and so on. And another group of factors theory tells us are important to do with what attracts individuals, women, men, into the labor market. And these have to do with wages. So we work because wages are higher or lower, or because our family income is not good enough. And so income is important, wages and income are important, and there are a set of other characteristics. They're basically describing the individual's own situation. So I've run all the gymnastics, the econometrics that comes with all these regressions, and did all the statistical exclusions, and did, Heckman tests and so on. And the results of my work were basically that this theory does not really explain what's happening in Palestine, in the sense that educational rates are high, fertility is low in Palestine, and wages do not seem to be at all a significant factor. So theory basically is sidelined, economic theory. It cannot really explain this reality. Then I look towards, feminist explanations and more of contributions from heterodox theoretical interventions. And I looked into issues, for example, like patriarchy, to try and explain women's exclusion from the labor market. And of course, patriarchy does play a role. But the issue is Palestinian society is the most liberal in the Middle East, in the sense that, if we compare Palestinian society to Saudi, for example, or Yemen, or even Jordan, our immediate neighbor, we find that Palestinian society is less conservative. At the same time, Palestinian society, women are already in the public sphere. Women are already out there going for education. They're not, there is no seclusion of women that is practiced. But of course, patriarchy is alive and kicking. So in a way, patriarchy did not really provide us with very insightful explanations into then why would a highly conservative society like Saudi have higher participation rates if patriarchy was a major contributing factor. Then I started looking into the impact of colonialism, settler colonialism, on the structures of the economy, and whether these actually can explain the exclusion of women in the labor market. And I've noticed that, as you know, women in the world, anywhere in the world, in the UK, in Sweden, in Zambia, in Palestine, this is a sort of applies to everyone. Women work in particular sectors and do not work in other particular sectors. So in Sweden, we find very few women in the transport sector. We find very few women in construction. And this applies to Palestine as well. So we don't have very many women working in construction. You have some engineers, female engineers and so on, but not very much construction workers. So women basically everywhere in the world work either in services, agriculture, manufacturing. These are the three sectors that are open to women everywhere in the world. What I've noticed in the Palestinian context that agriculture and manufacturing, their contribution to the economy, their contribution to GDP, to economic life, over the years has declined substantially. So in 1967, when Israel occupied the Palestinian territories, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, agriculture accounted for nearly 34-35% of GDP. At the moment, agriculture contributes to GDP by about 3%. Manufacturing at the same time declined also sharply. Of course, this reflected itself on employment. So at the moment, employment, the agricultural sector provides 7% of the employment in the economy, manufacturing 12%, but services are the largest employer within the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And services include hotels, restaurants, it includes education, it includes healthcare, and so on and so forth. So it's a broad sector. What basically has happened is the contraction of the sectors that actually employ women has meant that women have no place in the labor market. Women have one sector open to them, which is the services sector, while men have 5 sectors open to them, in addition to agriculture and manufacturing, which are the declining ones. Men can work in construction, they can work in transport, they can work in services, agriculture and manufacturing, while women can only work in 3 sectors. 2 of them have basically contracted substantially over the years. So this structural change within Palestinian economy meant that doesn't matter how much education women acquire, they will remain outside the labor market because the labor market does not have a place for them. It's important to note something about Palestinian workers in Israel. I looked at the statistics this morning. In 2022, there were 190,000 Palestinian workers in Israel. That basically accounts for 17% of Palestinian workers. They go to work to the Israeli labor market, of course, because of the higher wages. We are allowed to work in construction, agriculture, and some services like restaurants, hotels, and so on, but we're not allowed to access other work. Education, for example, we're not allowed to access education. We're not allowed to seek employment in other sectors. That's decreed by law. So we're allowed to just access certain low-skilled services, construction, and agriculture. Women, only 2% of Palestinian women work in the Israeli economy and settlements. So the vast majority of workers in Israel are male. And this has to do with the nature of this work, not it being heavy or not, but what actually goes around, how workers reach their workplaces and the times they are back from their workplaces. Usually workers in Israel, Palestinian workers in Israel have to start going to work very early in the morning, sometimes 2, 3 a.m., and they are back very late in the day. And they don't know what actually happens to them, in the sense that, they might be able to make it to work, they might not because of movement restrictions. They might actually end up sleeping rough on the streets if they are, if they can't find transport. Women who basically run families cannot not know that are they going to be back from work tonight or not. So this uncertainty, the fact that you do not know when you'll get to work, when you'll get back from work, the fact that you might be stuck at work for days and not be able to return to your home village or home camp or hometown is something that women cannot deal with because of their domestic responsibilities. Also, there's a lot of exploitation of Palestinian workers. In order to get a permit, there are middle people that exploit the process. So Palestinian workers cannot just access labor in Israel, they have to get particular permits. These permits are issued by Israel, but the manner with which they are distributed are subject to free riders and exploiters. The ILO has called these exploitative mechanisms as broker tax. So, for example, once these permits are issued, these brokers acquire these permits and sell them. And there are sort of, according to the ILO, 15% of Palestinian wages in Israel are actually lost on these brokers who actually exploit Palestinian workers and sell them permits, which they should get them without actually paying anything. So the fact that the economy, in a way, has the productive sectors of the economy have been destroyed, the fact that Palestinian women are not accessing work in the Israeli labor market, meant that basically they don't have very many choices. And this is why we have extremely low participation rates and extremely high unemployment rates. So the very few women who decide to join the labor market, the 17%, 50% of them end up as unemployed within the labor market. So how did this reality materialize? How did it come about? How did agriculture shrink? How did manufacturing shrink? Was it, a mechanism through which the Palestinians, in a way, restructured their economy? Unfortunately, it's not there. It's basically the impact of colonialism. The West Bank and Gaza Strip economies are very typical example. They're not really unique. They're a very typical example of colonized economies. If we would be studying the Indian economy under British colonialism, or Algeria under French colonialism, or anywhere else in the world, the picture would not be very different. It will not be very different in terms of the manner with which the colonialists control the economy. And how Israel controls our economy is by basically not allowing us to have control over economic policy. So we have no control over monetary policy. We cannot issue a currency. Thus, we have no control over interest rates. We cannot really control inflation. We import everybody's inflation. We use 3 currencies. We use Jordanian dinar, Israeli shekel, and American dollars. And we import all the problems of these 3 currencies, and we cannot protect ourselves from the problems of these currencies. Trade we have no control over borders. You know, the peace process did not have any impact over control over peace over borders. We cannot export or import freely. We, in a way, are subject to Israeli rules and regulations and whims in terms of our exports and imports. We also, the peace accords, the 1994 peace accords, allowed the Palestinians to have control over importing and exporting a number of goods and commodities that basically are subject to tariffs. And these tariffs are supposed to be collected by Israel and transferred to the Palestinians every few months. This was a system that was running in South Africa between, Botswana and South Africa. It has to do with a mechanism of reimbursement. So this system was somehow readjusted but utilized. Since we have no control over borders, Israel is supposed to collect tariffs and transfer these to the Palestinians. What Israel does is collect these tariffs and withholds these tariffs whenever it wants to subjugate the Palestinians. In 2001, with the Second Intifada, for about 14 months, these tariffs were withheld, and these tariffs are the source of payment for the public sector. So workers in the public sector did not get any payment for over 1 year. At the moment, I don't know if you've noticed on the news, Israel is again withholding these revenues. And the US is telling Israel, you have to transfer these revenues to the Palestinian Authority. And Israel is saying, no, we will not transfer these. Sorry, excuse me, just for a second. And Israel is refusing to transfer these revenues to the Palestinians, although it's Palestinian money. So in a way, we really have no control over the economy. But more importantly, all these colonial measures were coupled with a very determined process of undermining the agricultural and manufacturing sectors. This is a lesson that Israel learned from colonialists. Colonialists everywhere in the world, the first thing they do is destroy the productive sectors. Because the productive sectors are not an economic sector. They're economic, political, and social sectors. So if you destroy the productive sectors, you basically undermine the cohesion of the indigenous population. This is what happened, for example, in apartheid South Africa. There was a deliberate process of undermining indigenous agriculture and indigenous manufacturing. This is what the British did in India. So Israel did that, and how it did it is first through fragmenting the land confiscations, restrictions on the use of water, fragmenting the land. This is a picture of the West Bank in front of you. And we see three colors here: dark orange, light orange, and white. Dark orange is basically, these are the heavily populated areas. The light orange, and we call them area A. The light orange areas are B, and the vast majority of the West Bank is area C. Area C is under Israeli full control. Area B is civilian control for the Palestinians, military control for Israel. Area A, which only constitutes 18% of the West Bank, is controlled by the Palestinians. So Israel confiscates land in Area C and also has limits on our use of water. In 1967, there was an estimated amount of water that we were supposed to consume. It stayed the same till 1994 with the peace accords. It's been adjusted in 1994. Since 1994, it has not been adjusted. So our use of water, or the amount of water that we are allowed to use, is also very limited. Israel continued to build settlements, building the apartheid wall, building bypass roads, or apartheid roads, we call them, because these roads go through Palestinian territories, but we are not allowed to use these roads. They're Israeli exclusive roads. So they are very much apartheid roads. The wall, which is built on the western 1967 border between the West Bank and Israel, actually confiscates 10% of the West Bank land, but confiscates 95% of the Western water aquifer. So these 10% land made sure that they confiscate 95% of the water aquifer. So Palestinians didn't just lose the land, they also lost the water that is needed to irrigate whatever other land they had. Of course, structures are demolished regularly. According to the UN, in 2002, last year, there were 953 structures demolished by Israel in the West Bank. This means that these include homes, but also include businesses. Checkpoints and roadblocks basically kill any form of productivity within Palestine, not being able to deliver, not being able to manufacture. This all was also topped by the Palestinian Authority's neoliberal policies that basically meant that understanding the developmental reality within Palestine, within the West Bank and Gaza Strip, was very much the World Bank's approach, in the sense that, disconnect politics from economics. How can we deal with the economic reality in the West Bank and Gaza Strip? You can't do that in settler colonial realities. If the settler colonial power is working to destroy your economy, you cannot be worrying about issues like GDP growth as a standalone issue. I just wanted to show you our GDP. It's fantastic. I mean, we call it the yo-yo curve. This is in real terms. So we, at certain years, we have minus nearly 13%. And then in the following year, we have 14%. So in 1 year, we have minus 13%. In the following year, we have positive 13%. Then 5 years down the line, we go minus 4%. And a few years later, we are 12%. There's nowhere else in the world that has such a magnificent growth rates. These are very reflective of what basically happens in the Gaza Strip. Every huge decline in the growth rates is an Israeli war on the Gaza Strip. And every rise is the aid that the Palestinians receive to reconstruct Israel's, the repercussions of Israel's war. So the entire economy is about deconstructing and constructing, while the actual structural changes that happen in the economy are non-existent, because we are just destroying and rebuilding. And very much the rebuilding is paid for by neighboring Arab countries, the EU, little by the US. And we always go back to square zero. So for us as Palestinian scholars, what we're trying to do is, okay, we understand the power of economic theory, feminist theories, these are very important, but we are trying to highlight the impact of settler colonialism and the exceptionalism of analyzing the Palestinian context. It is not exceptional. The settler colonial stories, realities are part of our history. North America, the annihilation of the indigenous population, other non-settler colonial realities have also been existent. So these realities, Palestine fits into this framework. If we want to understand women's engagement in the labor market as a distinct process from the ongoing settler colonial reality, we cannot. We will end up refusing all forms of theories and basically ending up with no explanation. So for us, it's extremely important to situate and contextualize reality within this settler colonial scheme, Israeli settler colonial scheme, which is not ongoing just from last year or 20 years ago. It's ongoing since 1948. And the impact that it had on the economy is extremely visible. In this case, it's been colonialism actually hit women more than men. It privileged men and it undermined women's capacity to engage and be present in the labor market. So understanding economic phenomena, social phenomena within the Palestinian context has to be centered around understanding the settler colonial reality locally, but also situating it within the international discourse of global and economic structures and the development of colonialism. Capitalism. And my final point, and I spoke a bit more than 40 minutes, my final point is to do with what we do in a way to resist this reality, because we do not see ourselves as passive victims. We see ourselves as a people who are colonized not just by Israel, as we've discovered in the past month, but by, huge powers in the world. And this colonization process, we've devised different mechanisms to resist it. One mechanism which is relevant, particularly relevant for the issue that I've talked about, which is women's engagement in the labor market, is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And the fact locally, what this movement is trying to do is within Palestine is encourage the Palestinians to replace Israeli goods and commodities by Palestinian ones, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing. There is, in a way, that is a mechanism through which we can generate employment. Israel basically dumps its agricultural produce at very cheap prices in Palestine compared to its own prices. So if you want to buy a kilo of potatoes in Tel Aviv and the West Bank from the same source, you find it in the West Bank, Israeli potatoes. You find these in the West Bank sold for less than probably 70% lower prices than you would find them in Tel Aviv. And this is basically to undermine Palestinian agriculture, to hit Palestinian agriculture. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to work on cultural productivity, but also get consumers to consume Palestinian goods and services and boycott Israel, not just for political reasons. Of course, political reasons are very important, but also for economic reasons, in order to lessen dependency on the Israeli economy, in order to, in a way, lessen the grip of settler colonialism on the structures of our economy. Of course, aid plays a mechanism through which Israeli colonialism is enhanced, in the sense that if you look at the Palestinian Authority's budget, aid allocated to agriculture is 1%. Aid allocated to security, which is basically aimed at protecting Israel's security, accounts for more than 35% of that budget. So for us, engaging in BDS, be it economic, cultural, or academic, is significant as a political form of solidarity. But actually engaging in BDS helps us and enables us economically. It enables us in a way that would challenge Israel's settler colonialism and the structures that it had imposed on us over the past 75 years. I think I should stop with this and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.